Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of The Deal, our Super Bowl thoughts. Alex Rodriguez, my co-host, myself, Jason Kelly, joining you, breaking down the big game from, what I would like to think is our unique perspective, Alex. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Super Bowl Monday. This is one of my favorite days of the year because it reminds me, Jason, in my career that baseball's right around the corner.
Yes.
The Monday after the Super Bowl is baseball's almost here, spring's almost here, warm weather, all of it.
That's great. That's a good point. Because I have to say, Super Bowl Monday, I feel the same way, but I also feel like, football's over. I love watching football. You and I love talking about it. So let's talk about it. I mean, this game, I don't think anybody on this Super Bowl Monday is like, hey, everyone, great game, unless you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. What did you think of it?
Well, I just think that I can relate big time with the Kansas City Chiefs. Pat Mahomes, obviously I've known him since he was a child because I played with his father, Pat Mahomes Sr. But, you either love the Chiefs or you hate the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And I think the chatter, at least in my opinion, going in, I don't think people gave the Eagles enough credit on how great they are from top of the organization to bottom. It was an absolute masterclass from ownership to GM to head coach, defensive coordinator, you name it. They won every category by a landslide.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to unpack it with you. The first is, you touched on it, and I'm going to take it a step further. I think the Kansas City Chiefs this season essentially became the villain of the NFL. Would you agree? And I dare say, a little bit of what that's like playing for the team you played for. How do you read that? Why was that?
Well, I mean, look, when you're that good, I think there's some fatigue, right? There's some jealousy for sure. I mean, fan bases that haven't been, think about if you're the Bills, right? And you're a fan base and you see the Chiefs just winning and winning and winning, and they have now glamour and they have, the great Taylor Swift and they have Hall of Famers all over the place. And, the red, it gets a little bright for people. And I think that's what you saw.
Yeah. And the other funny thing is the Eagles are a team that, I don't know, people love to hate because, Philadelphia fans, again, this is something you know as well as anyone, are like no other. They have a ferocity all their own. And yet it did feel like the stadium, at least watching it on TV, it felt like the stadium was very pro-Eagles. I mean, it wasn't quite a home game, but it definitely felt like it was with them, sort of with them in the room. All right, I want to lean on your expertise here in two different ways. And I want you to put yourself in the mindset of each of these quarterbacks. Pat Mahomes, you said, you noted, you've known him since he was a child. You played with his dad. The pressure going into that game, what does that feel like? What do you think was sort of going through his head leading up to it? And then as it is clearly coming apart?
Well, I think if you're Patrick Mahomes, you want to eliminate the white noise because there's a lot of it. 2 weeks is a long time. It's a long time between games. I think Patrick Mahomes knew how good the Eagles were, a little bit disconnect from, I would say, the general fan base. And I felt that, he said after the game yesterday that the agony of defeat hurts more than the glory of winning or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But for me, there was a lot of pressure on Patrick Mahomes, and it's almost a no-win situation. Yes, you get the three-peat, but man, you show up to the dance often enough, it's just a matter of time till you get whacked.
Yeah.
And last night, they got whacked.
So I dare say you felt that feeling. What does it feel like? How do you process that when the expectations are so high and you don't meet them?
I think, look, it's hard enough to repeat. The numbers will tell you it's almost impossible. Now, to do a three-peat, that's almost really impossible, especially in such a competitive league. Look, the Eagles had it all working. And if you look at the numbers, and you look inside the data, the Eagles were a better team all year long.
Yeah.
From training camp to last night. And I think the Chiefs are looking at, we're 1 point favorite, 1.5 point. And they're like, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
We might be the dogs here. But I think for a guy like Patrick Mahomes, I'm really looking forward to see how he comes back. But the daunting task of having to do that back to back to back, I think it was too much against a team like the Eagles.
So what's your advice to him?
Well, I don't think he needs advice, but I think knowing Patrick the way I do, I think he's going to get back to the drawing board, and I think they have some work to do. Again, that is not my circle of competence, but it seems like they're going to probably strengthen their line a little bit. It seems like they're going to go out and get, beef up that roster a little bit and put the necessary pieces for Patrick Mahomes to get back to the Super Bowl and win it. And look, just like the Eagles did a couple years ago, they came back stronger than ever.
Yeah.
I think the Chiefs will be back. I can almost guarantee that.
All right, I'm going to move to the Eagles in a second, but I'm going to push you on this because I feel like as your friend and your partner, I'm going to do this. It's like, I understand what you're saying about the football, but as an athlete, like you have insights into this that almost no one does. Like, how do you get your head right after you lose like that?
Well, I think here's the deal. When we lost in 2004 to the Red Sox after being up 3-0, I think that's a whole different way. Not all losses are created equal. I think it's actually easier to get over last night because that was a whacking, right? I mean, they got destroyed in every level. They really did. I mean, it was over from the get-go. And then you see the interceptions, and then you see another one. And I'm sure for Patrick, he felt quite embarrassed and some shame. I know that's how I felt. You almost don't want to come out of your house for a month or two. But I think this is going to build him up. I think he's crushed right now. I think he's a little bit in disbelief. He played his worst game of the year, the biggest. That's something that you can never say about Patrick Mahomes. So I think I know that after 2004, I was destroyed, and it took a lot out of me. And I came back in 2005 and came back stronger than ever. I won an MVP. And then, of course, in 2009, we won the world title. So I can see Patrick Mahomes coming back stronger, but it's going to take a minute to get over this loss. This one hurts.
Yeah. All right, so let's shift to Jalen Hurts because he comes into this game with, like, a head full of bulletin board material, right? I mean, he played out of his mind 2 years ago. I mean, literally the best game of his life, and the team comes up short. How does he, in your mind, how did he go into the game yesterday, and what does that feel like from your perspective? And maybe it's 05, maybe it's 09 for you. How does it feel like when you're like, okay, I put in the work, and now I see the fruits of that labor?
Much easier than Patrick Mahomes, because here's a guy who played really, really well.
Yeah.
And couldn't close. But that's easier from a psychological point of view because you can say, okay, I showed up in the biggest game, great confidence. I just need my boys to follow.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. After he lost that game a couple years ago, I think he said, we'll be back. And he was very resolute and very confident that they were going to come back. And this time they're going to be ready. And I think he's been prepping for last night, the Super Bowl, for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it helps. It helps. Like a tidal wave of confidence when you play well at the highest level and your teammates come up a little short, then the other way around.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting.
By the way, let me just say this. The comp in baseball, this is something that I do know about, is Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
Like when Aaron Judge loses against the Dodgers and he makes that, the mistake where he drops the simple fly ball and fans are getting on him, I think that's a double avalanche to overcome. He played poorly and the Yankees got embarrassed. For a guy like Aaron Judge, is a double whammy. That's much harder than the battle we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. So you alluded to something really important, which is what happens with the Eagles over the intervening 2 years between that loss. And it happens very quickly. And what's interesting is, from an ownership perspective, these are ownership groups that you and I know more than enough to be dangerous about, I dare say. Both very resolute. In the case of the Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie, I did a documentary about him a couple years ago. He's a very different sort of owner, very understated, as you know, really is involved and also really trusts his people. His relationship with Howie Roseman is probably one of the lesser known, but arguably most important storylines here, because what they do over 2 years is they draft incredibly well and they really identify what the missing pieces are. When I think about the business lessons from what the Eagles have done, that's what strikes me, is that like they really figured out what they needed and they went and got it, because this was an entirely different team, especially on the defensive side, than we saw 2 years ago. And that's just, again, we see all these lessons between sports and sort of business more broadly. That to me is like a management, to use your word, a management masterclass.
Yeah, Jason. And the thing is, by the way, I love that piece you did with him a few years ago because I learned a lot about him. Jeffrey Lurie, I'm talking about, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles. The adjustment they made was not that rare. If you're talking about 5, 10, 20 years, what makes it rare is they did it inside of 2 years.
Yeah.
And that is a testament to Jeff Lurie, the owner. Now, when you think about their ownership group, you said it, they draft well, they do one free agency, they develop their players, and their alignment from top to bottom. Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, he is the epitome of what VCP stands for. Big vision, clear vision. He deploys tons of capital to go get his players like Barkley, and then you go out and get the best people in the world. And that just doesn't mean on the field, but it also means his general manager, his coach, his defensive coordinator, the head of business, chief revenue officer. Jeff Lurie is a masterclass on how to run an organization, and he deserves a lot of flowers.
Yeah, I mean, and did it, very quietly. I mean, again, in a city that you and I both know does not hold back, and yet he is revered. And listen, he has brought this city 2 titles, its first 2 NFL titles, its first 2 NFL championships, over his ownership in the last 10 years. He's owned it for longer, but those have come there with, by the way, 2 different coaches, 2 different quarterbacks, obviously a whole different, roster of players and coaches underneath that. But the one consistency there, other than Jeffrey Lurie, is Howie Roseman. So we got to get one of those guys on this pod, by the way.
We do. And Jason, I want to just kind of double tap on what you just mentioned, because, as an owner or an organization, sometimes you have easier markets to be able to navigate, adjustments. But in a city that you have more white noise, arguably with that fan base and the radio and the media than any other franchise, probably only second to New York or 1-2, 1A, 1B. And to do it in such a stealth matter, in such a noisy place, which arguably you're talking about some of the most smartest, most passionate fans in sports, the Philadelphia, whether it's the Phillies, the Eagles, or the Sixers, they bring it every day, and they expect you as a player, you as a general manager, and you as an owner to bring it 24/7.
Let's go back to the game for a second, because it was on your home network. As happy as the Eagles were, I'm going to go out on not much of a limb and say your friends at Fox were not pleased at how lopsided that game was. I have not seen the final ratings. I have to think I've seen anecdotally that viewership dropped off pretty dramatically after halftime because the game felt over, and it turns out it definitely was over. If you're sitting at Fox right now, are you just thinking bad luck? It's obviously outside of their control, but what are they feeling right now?
From the Murdochs to Eric Shanks, they're just great people to work with. It's amazing. This is an organization that they're not married to ratings. They control what they can control. What it is anticlimactic, right? I mean, they've been planning for 2 years, and this is the baby. This is what they pay all those billions of dollars for. And here's what I think Eric Shanks would say. I'm happy with all the controllables.
Yeah.
We had a good telecast. We put on a good show. We had good numbers. And then the game fell off, and that's not on us. But that's not just unique to Fox. It was CBS, NBC, ABC, Disney, whatever. Everybody would be disappointed with a game that's, a little bit out of reach past the middle of the second quarter.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's go to the booth, Alex. These are your guys. Kevin Burkhardt, who is your other partner. I'm very jealous of him. And obviously, Tom Brady, your good friend. They're in the booth calling the game. What's your obviously biased perspective on them?
Well, again, disclaimer, I love them both. They're both very good friends. I think Kevin Burkhardt is one of the most underrated, to this day still, even after doing a couple Super Bowls, one of the most underrated, undersung superstars out there. He does not only a great job for football, and he kind of drives the bus for Tom Brady. He does a great job with the Fox World Series crew with Derek Jeter, myself, Dontre Willis, and Big Papi. And if Tom Brady was a stock, I would buy as much as I can afford. I would buy all of it. And the reason why I say that, I think he got so much better from week 1 to week, call it 21 last night, right, to the Super Bowl. I just think his work ethic is, second to none. And if you study his resume, he's a guy that just, he knows ascending better than anyone. And I think that in 3 or 4 years, he's going to be one of the top guys, if not the top guy in the game.
Yeah. I will say it was fun to watch him. I mean, there were so many undercurrents, especially because It wasn't that long ago that he was playing. Obviously, it was only a couple years. There's all this GOAT debate. It certainly was coming into it with Mahomes. And Mahomes, had they won last night, the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes would have done something that Brady had not done in terms of winning 3 in a row. I mean, nobody has done it in the Super Bowl era. So it was interesting to watch that. I mean, it was also interesting. And again, I don't know playing sports at the level you or Tom Brady do, certainly. But, this notion of, sort of Brady watching all of this unfold, it must have been candidly like challenging for him to just even process what he was seeing, because he must know, again, more than anyone, how that felt for Patrick Mahomes to have that sort of performance and just be overwhelmed by a defense. I mean, in some ways, it happened to Tom a couple times, because he was 7-3 in his 10 Super Bowls. So he didn't win every one. But it's fascinating to have him calling that game of any game.
Yeah, a few things there. There's a lot to unpack there, Jason. So number one, you and I about a month and a half ago did a pod here on The Deal. And I felt the same way probably Tom felt about watching the great Patrick Mahomes. I felt the same way watching Juan Soto go through his negotiations.
Yeah.
Because around 24 years ago, I was in that same spot. And that was kind of a weird, unique. That's why I'm so glad we jumped in the pod. That's one. Two, it's really hard to judge or appraise both Tom Brady and Kevin Burkhardt in a game that's that wide open, because it really goes from first half is a Super Bowl to second half is talk radio.
Yeah.
And there's no big watershed moments. Like, I like to appraise announcers in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, and for football, down the stretch, because I want Tom to tell me, should they do a 3-step drop or a 7-step drop? Should they be doing a screen or running here? And that only happens when you have all the money on the table. So last night, it's almost like a pass. I don't know. You don't know. You almost throw out the report card, really.
Yeah.
Because at this point, you're just trying to entertain and have a little fun, which is very, very challenging. And I've been in that position. But, him talking about Patrick Mahomes, I thought was a great subplot. I think, how does he react if he's going to do the three-peat? The fact that he had access to production meetings this week, I thought that's an interesting step, because it's been talked about that Tom Brady doesn't have access to production meetings because of his ownership with the Raiders. And again, who better, if the game is a blowout, who better to talk about coming back in that stadium than Tom Brady?
I will say, as an Atlanta Falcons fan, it was excruciating to think about the biggest comparison, of course, had they come back, would have been 28-3, of course, the worst moment in everybody except New England Patriots fans.
By the way, Jason, you said something earlier about the fans were a little bit louder for the Eagles than Kansas City. You remember in the mid-'90s to late '90s, the Braves fans sometimes wouldn't sell out for the playoff games.
Yeah.
And because they went every year, it was like, unless it's the World Series or bust, and I'm not going to get stimulated over first or second round.
Yeah.
The Yankees went through a little bit of a lull where they were very spoiled from winning, right? I think there's maybe a little bit of that with the Chiefs, where the Eagles are like this kind of, they're both blue collars, but we haven't won, we need to beat them. And you felt a little bit more energy, at least early in the game, before it was a blowout.
Yeah. All right. I want to wrap up by talking a little bit about the ads. I got to tell you, I was a little bit underwhelmed. I feel like we need a little more creativity. I will say one theme that definitely jumped out to me is a theme that we've been talking about a lot on our podcast, which is women's sports. And, clearly I thought two of the most compelling ads were the Nike ad, your friends at Nike creating just a super powerful ad with an unbelievable number of powerful female athletes led by Caitlin Clark, Sha'Carri Richardson, Sabrina Ionescu, and a number of others. That is one that if people haven't watched, they should go back just for the artistry, the message, the music, all of it. And then the other, and I feel like this is something we're probably going to be dealing with and wanting to deal with on the show, is flag football and everything that's happening there. The NFL is clearly pushing that from a business perspective. They know that there's an audience for it and a way to grow the audience for the NFL by getting more young women to play football. What did you think?
I love that. I love what Roger Goodell is doing with trying to grow football, and he's going two places that are evident. One is youth sports and youth trying to, take market share from baseball and soccer and other sports by flag football. I think that's brilliant. I think the more you can introduce young ladies to the game, the better. That's one. And two, obviously, their global reach, right?
Yeah.
Where they have big ambitions to grow the game and play all these global games, even with more repetition. A couple of the ones that I liked was Tom Brady and Snoop, Fighting Hate. I think that's a Robert Kraft production.
Yes.
He's deployed tons of capital and resources to help fight hate. And also, it was nice that Snoop and Tom Brady, neither one got paid for that ad, which, props to them. But my favorite was Nike. I think they had maybe a 20-plus year hiatus. I know it's been a while. And to come back in the way they did, I think was beautifully done and a step in the right direction because their stock has really struggled here in the last 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, interesting turning point we may see. They got a new CEO and, that's something I'm guessing we're going to be talking about on future episodes. All right, so speaking of which, we're moving on to baseball, man. Like, it's all happening. We've got a lot coming up on this show, so we'll wrap for now. But I really love being able to chop it up with you right after a big event like this. It was fun to watch it knowing it felt like homework in a good way. Like I was taking little notes on my phone as I was watching. I was like, I got to ask Alex about this, and I wanted to take on these things. So appreciate you for hopping on, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon.
You got it.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
All right. My thanks to my partner, Alex Rodriguez. And you've been listening to a special edition of The Deal here from Bloomberg. The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and me, Jason Kelly. This episode was made by Stacey Wong, Anna Mazarakis, and Lizzie Phillip. Our theme music was made by Blake Maples. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. Additional support from Kelly LaFerriere, Ashley Honig, Rachel Scaramuzzino, and Elena Sausangelis. If you have a minute, subscribe, rate, and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. And remember, if you're a Bloomberg subscriber, you can listen to all of our episodes absolutely ad-free on Apple Podcasts. All you need to do is find the Bloomberg channel and connect your Bloomberg account. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.